Chapter 10-11, The Road Home. Enough. Gu Lingfei broke Lu Shu off. If she did not break him off, she was really worried that the candidates of the Sword Hut selections would start singing and dancing under Lu Shu's commands. Lu Shu stood quietly and shrugged, as though he was saying, "What do you want me to say?" Initially, Lu Shu wanted to remember the names of those in the Sword Hut directly. However, he did not expect there to be so many people who provided him with distress points, to the point where he could not recognize them. Even the public who were standing outside the fences began to provide him with distress points. Too much distress points was burdensome too. Gu Lingfei said coldly as she sat on the head of the black leopard, "Pray for blessings." At this moment, when the disciples of the Sword Hut stood evenly on both sides of the two statues, Lu Shu realized that there was a table behind the statue. Then, Gu Lingfei knelt below the female statue and said, "Dear teacher, please give your blessings for the Sword Hut's swordplay." Then, Gu Lingfei knelt down in front of the male statue and said, "King of gods, please bless our people's safety." Lu Shu was surprised. So that was the old King of Gods and the owner of the Sword Hut. Wasn't the owner of the Sword Hut still alive? Why did they turn the two into gods and worship them? He peered at the expressions on the faces of the people nearby. Everyone seemed to be used to it. Nobody felt that the blessing ceremony was inappropriate. Lu Shu looked at the two statues again. However, he did not know who carved this statue. He only felt that there was a spiritual presence in the statue. By right, it was difficult for the statue to show its original owner's appearance, and the aura was the main thing people looked out for. As a woman, the owner of the Sword Hut exuded immense charisma and she looked somewhat angry. Lu Shu suddenly recalled what the other party said, "I only need 30% of the scenery." She claimed that she needed 30% and really took only 30%. As a female, what sort of broad aspiration was that? Meanwhile, Lu Shu was carefully examining the other party's appearance by looking at the statue of the old King of Gods. However, he felt that the aura was so complicated that it was difficult to be described. It felt as though the other party had a strange boost of energy. Lu Shu was very surprised. As the leader of the world, shouldn't he exude an arrogant aura? At this moment, the disciples of the Sword Hut went forward to worship him, followed by the candidates. When it was the candidate's turn, Yu Wentao said, "I pray for the owner of the Sword Hut to ensure my successful entrance to the Sword Hut. I, Yu Wentao, am willing to protect everyone in the Sword Hut." Then, Lu Shu realized that the number of people ahead of him started to decrease. Before he knew it, it was his turn. Lu Shu thought about it for a long while before he walked over to the statue of the old King of Gods, knelt down and said peacefully, "King of Gods, I wish for your good health and wealth." At this moment, everything around him became silent. It felt as though Lu Shu was holding on to a switch. When he pressed it, the world was muted. However, what made it difficult for everyone to accept and understand was, why did the switch appear in Lu Shu's hands? The onlookers looked sheepishly at Lu Shu. Gu Lingfei, as well as the candidates beside them, also looked sheepishly at Lu Shu. All these years, after the blessing ceremony by the candidates, the public ought to kneel down and automatically make their prayers. However, all this while, everyone was praying for the King of Gods and the owner of the Sword Hut's blessings. This was the first time they had seen someone make their prayers for the King of Gods. How crazy! From Gu Lingfei's distress, plus 666. From Yu Wentao. From. Lu Shu stood up and said as he looked at their suspicious gazes, "Don't all of you think that you guys are being unloyal to the King of Gods and the owner of the Sword Hut? Why did they protect all of you? If you respect them, you should wish them to live a good life. Perhaps they are living a happy life in the heavenly country. When you guys make prayers, they have to return from the heavenly country to look after you guys. Does this even make sense? Is this how you guys treat people whom you respect?" From Gu Lingfei's distress, plus 666. From. This sentence made Gu Lingfei and the rest speechless. Gu Lingfei held it in for a long time. Scram. Lu Shu moved to the side obediently. As someone who just arrived, he should not make himself so eye-catching. Then, the situation turned awkward. Gu Lingfei forgot what she should do next. The onlookers suddenly felt that they did not make a wasted trip today. It felt as though a coin collector suddenly found a precious coin with a wrong printing. Because its printing was wrong, it had an immeasurable value. After they were dispersed, they could return home and tell the rest who were not present, all of you are losing out. Do you know that this happened in the sword hut today? Gu Lingfei turned to Lu Shu suddenly. Why don't you go and take a rest at the back? There's nothing much for you to do here. She said this because Lu Shu did not have to participate in the test as he was already a disciple of the sword hut. Lu Shu said humbly, I think it is better to be fair to everyone. I am willing to participate in the test along with the rest of the candidates. Before Lu Shu could finish his sentence, many of the candidates' hearts sank. Can you please King get lost? Nobody wants to see your face now. Gu Lingfei said coldly, are you leaving or not? At this moment, the black leopard beside her suddenly shrunk and turned into a sword that floated beside Gu Lingfei. Lu Shu was stunned. The black leopard was a sword? He had seen magical weapons with weapon spirits. However, magical weapons were still weapons, he could not believe it when he saw a weapon turn into a living thing. Moreover, since it was rank 1, it ought to be able to fly. That was much more charismatic than flying in the sky alone. However, Lu Shu said calmly when he saw how Gu Lingfei was about to attack, I suddenly feel tired, I will walk around, you guys can continue. Remember to call me if there are any problems. After he said that, Lu Shu ran towards the back of the sword hut and did not care about the opinion of the rest of the people. The candidates of the sword hut heaved a sigh of relief. Lu Shu walked directly towards the cottage at the back as though it was nobody's business. At this moment, he realized how important the position of the cottage was. From afar, the cottage made the place look like a yard without boundaries. After crossing the cottage, one felt as though things were changing. Of course, the cottage was not very small. When they went near, every cottage was as big as a mansion. At the center, there was a cottage which was extremely delicate. After walking for a very long time, Lu Shu looked up and saw a simple banner on the cottage which read library. He thought about his initial intention of entering the sword hut. Didn't he want to look for the records from the palace of the King of Gods? His heart was pounding. The way back home was just in front of his eyes. Chapter 10-12, The Sword Formation of the Cottage. The words library looked extremely proper. Lu Shu could not hide his excitement. He looked around secretly and stepped into the library since he did not see anyone around. Lu Shu was thinking, could there be a guard around in an important place like the library? After all, it contained the books of the entire palace of the King of Gods. However, when Lu Shu walked in, nobody stopped him. There was nobody in the library. He took a few steps behind and pushed a door near the cottage. Then, he saw a man sitting with his legs crossed on the ground with a sword in its sheath. When the man heard the door open, he opened his eyes. However, when he opened his eyes, the door was already closed. Lu Shu walked into the library feeling bothered. Isn't there someone here? Not everyone has gone to the sword hut selections. Why isn't anyone guarding the library, which is an important place? As he said that, he stepped into the library. As he walked, he examined the orientation of the room. When he saw the first 2 rows of shelves, he was stunned. It was difficult to look at these books, they were the poems of the king? Were the people crazy? Why did they keep such books? Lu Shu sighed. He thought the sword hut was different, but it was just as old-fashioned. Old-fashioned. He randomly grabbed a book and flipped. He was stunned almost immediately. The first poem was Quiet Night Thought, written by Li Bai Wan. The poem was printed within and the author's name was handwritten. Don't tell me the owner of the sword hut wrote it, exclaimed Lu Shu. He had always been curious. In the past, someone told him that the owner of the sword hut went to the palace of the king of gods to fight with the old king of gods for the poems of the king. At that moment, he wondered if the owner of the sword hut was someone from Earth. There were also rumors saying how the owner of the sword hut was a child adopted by the old king of gods when he was out on a vacation. Therefore, Lu Shu was thinking, perhaps he went to Earth and copied so many poems. Therefore, the owner of the sword hut should have come from Earth too. Therefore, the owner of the sword hut did not expose the old king of gods blatantly but instead helped to take care of his reputation. However, the books in the sword hut's library was filled with handwritten information regarding the book's author and place of origin. Initially, Lu Shu was not very interested in the library, but he suddenly became extremely interested. He felt as though his heart was burning with the urge to find out more. He revealed such a big secret by randomly flipping through a book. He wanted to take every book out to flip through them. Then, Lu Shu realized that the owner of the sword hut had written down the author of every poem. Of course, the owner of the sword hut was not someone who studied the old poems. Therefore, it was understandable that they did not know who the author of certain poems were. However, even if they did not know who the author was, they still wrote a small line of words at the back of the poem. Although Lu Shu did not know who wrote it, he was certain that it was not written by that particular person. TSK, Lu Shu was initially mad with how the old king of gods got rid of his backup plan. Now that he saw what the owner of the sword hut did, he suddenly felt relieved. After a very long time spent flipping through the books, Lu Shu regained his senses and realized that the sun had set. At this moment, he heard footsteps outside the library. Then, he heard Gu Lingfei's voice. What is going on? How can he go missing in the sword hut? If he disappeared, you guys are in trouble. Suddenly, Gu Lingfei stopped in front of the library of the cottage and turned. Both Gu Lingfei and Lu Shu's eyes met. Lu Shu was about to say that he entered to take a look at the books. Since he was young, he loved to read books. Then, he suddenly realized that Gu Lingfei's expression turned to a look of disbelief. It was the first time she showed that expression on her beautiful face. Gu Lingfei was shocked. How did you get in? Who allowed you to go in? Lu Shu was unhappy. Nobody was guarding the library and there was no rule stating that nobody could enter. Why couldn't he enter? He said while looking at Gu Lingfei, I am here to browse the books. Gu Lingfei was panicking. She tried to take a step into the library of the cottage and before her feet could touch the ground, the sound of a sword could be heard echoing throughout the library. It was an extremely sharp sound. Lu Shu looked up in shock. He suddenly realized that the grass of which the cottage was made up of turned as dangerous as swords. The library was a sword formation. At this moment, he finally understood why Gu Lingfei panicked. No wonder the place was left unguarded. Ordinary people could not even enter, including Master Gu Lingfei. Gu Lingfei asked coldly, Teacher had left for so many years and nobody could enter. Why can you enter? Lu Shu was confused. That's right, how did I enter? As he said that, Lu Shu stepped into the deep corners of the library and Gu Lingfei demanded in a low voice, Get out now. Lu Shu said nonchalantly, You come in and get me. Although Lu Shu did not understand why others could not enter but he could, he knew that if he went out and was caught by Gu Lingfei, he would never have the chance to go in again. Therefore, he could not go out. Moreover, the way back home was in the library. Or rather, he wanted to dig out all the secrets in the library before he left. Judging from how Gu Lingfei rushed Lu Shu out, it seemed like she had entered in the past and knew that it was an important place. However, that was precisely why Lu Shu wanted to stay. Moreover, if the master could not enter the cottage, it was the safest place. However, Lu Shu thought that even though the owner of the sword hut had exceeded the master realm, they would not be able to prevent a master from entering by randomly plotting a sword formation. Gu Lingfei probably did not attack because she was worried that she would destroy the entire library. Lu Shu did not know that all the 7 masters of the sword hut had entered the library and was taught by the owner of the sword hut. This was the second most mysterious place, apart from the rear mountain, in the sword hut. Only those of the master realm could enter. After the owner of the sword hut left hurriedly 12 years ago, nobody could enter the library at all. As Lu Shu walked, he suddenly discovered that the library only had poems of the king. He did not believe it initially, but after touring the entire library, he confirmed that there were only poems of the king. His face turned black immediately. Were all the books hidden? Chapter 1013, Handwritten Words of the Owner of the Sword Hut. Lu Shu casually strolled in the library in an attempt to find the hidden mechanism. Gu Lingfei waited outside to capture Lu Shu when he exited the library. In the past, when new disciples entered the sword hut, every single one of them was well-mannered. The name and power of the sword hut was enough to suppress the pride of the geniuses. However, Gu Lingfei did not understand why the name and the power of the sword hut did not have the same effect on Lu Shu. She knew what Lu Shu was thinking about. Of course he wanted to have a good look before he left. However, Gu Lingfei laughed coldly. She was one of the people who knew the secrets of the library. Even if Lu Shu managed to find the secret location, how long could he stay there for? Did he not need to eat and drink to survive? However, at the next moment, she heard a loud boom from within the library. Gu Lingfei was stunned. He managed to find it so quickly? What was he up to usually? How did he manage to find the secret location so quickly? However, she calmed down. There were an unimaginable amount of books in the secret location. Because of the lack of food and water, Lu Shu would probably exit after reading less than 10% of the books. Gu Lingfei turned around. The sword beside her turned into a black leopard again and brought her up into the sky. She disappeared. A tall mountain was situated in the sky of the sword hut. Like a heavenly island in the sky, the green vines from the body of the mountain dangled in midair and the entire mountain looked like a fortress. There were cottages on the mountain too. However, the cottages were scarce and they looked extremely simple and crude. Gu Lingfei walked to the top of the mountain with the black leopard. She pursed her lips when she saw her senior brother sitting on the peak of the mountain. Please chase him out of the sword hut, I cannot stand him anymore. Her senior brother, who was practicing his sword skills with his eyes shut, was wearing white baggy clothes. The dust in the sky did not seem to be able to land on his body at all. Or perhaps they were at such a high altitude such that there was no dust. The air was very thin, but the practitioner was not bothered about that. The masters who had their own laws were even more unconcerned. Without opening his eyes, the senior disciple of the sword hut smiled. It's not possible. Only you have such a good temper. Nobody else will be able to stand him. Why did you even return? Gu Lingfei said angrily, why are you tolerating his nonsense? I admit that he is one of the most powerful rank 1 experts I have met, but the sword hut does not lack any geniuses. Stop trying to find out, smiled the senior disciple of the sword hut. Certain things will be revealed when the time comes. You and I cannot decide on the day. Gu Lingfei sat on the black leopard's head helplessly while supporting her chin. The black leopard sprawled on the ground lazily. It was a living creature which could turn into a sword. How amazing was that? Then tell me, where have you been all these years? Gu Lingfei suddenly asked. I have been practicing my sword skills for the ceremony of the sword hut. I deserve some recognition for my efforts, at least tell me where have you been? The senior disciple of the sword hut suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the west side. The weather is changing. Gu Lingfei pouted. Just be frank if you don't want to say, stop distracting me with these tricks. The weather is really going to change, said the senior disciple of the sword hut with a low voice. I wonder how they are going to make the selection this time. Lu Shu left speechless, looked at the space which was suddenly opened. He saw a collection of poems which had a line on the front page that read, "I am a talented writer, nobody can beat me." The words were so special that Lu Shu only managed to regain his senses after a long time. Could it be handwritten by the old king of gods? He continued to flip through the book and realized that all the poems were handwritten, not printed. Beneath the line, there were a few lines of small words which all read "shameless." The fonts were all different and they looked as though they were written by different people. Read the next chapter on our VIPnovel.com. This made Lu Shu feel refreshed. He felt as though he was looking at an online forum as he browsed through the poem collections in the Luniverse. Therefore, Lu Shu also took out his pen and wrote the word "shameless." After that, the book started to absorb the magical energy from heaven and earth and the entire space suddenly changed. This is a F** king trick device? Lu Shu was stunned for a long while. This can be a F** king trick device too? What a F** king abnormal world. However, to Gu Lingfei, that was the most unbelievable event. How many people dared to ridicule the old king of gods? Even if the old king of gods was no longer around, nobody dared to do that. How dare a rank 1 write down the word "shameless" in that book? He gradually walked in. It was a wide library and the wooden shelves on the walls were stuffed with books. Beside that, different labels were fixed on the wooden shelves. The books were categorized into many categories such as history, war, living creatures, medicine, and more. This is strange. Why are there no books of the martial arts category in this huge library? Lu Shu felt that something was amiss and found a 30 cm shelf that was labeled with the words "martial arts" at the corner. However, there were no books on this shelf. For some reason, Lu Shu suddenly felt that the owner of the sword hut did not keep any related books because he was too proud, and looked down on the other forms of a martial arts. Lu Shu looked up and saw a table in the middle of the library. A huge book was placed on the table. Lu Shu walked over gradually as he was afraid that there were deadly traps around it. However, he realized he was being too paranoid. He flipped open the book and saw the contents of the first page. The wave of qi was extremely strong and the snow mountain was vast. The sword stood upright like the mountains and penetrated the sky. From today onwards, it shall be named the Sword Hut. The handwriting was the same handwriting as that person who wrote the origins of the poems of the king. This meant that the owner of the Sword Hut had written it personally. However, the words beneath this sentence was much more complicated. Master is amazing. Master is so amazing. Master is undefeatable. Master rules the entire world. Lu Shu was speechless. Why were they so many comments? At this moment, Lu Shu took a deep breath. Hold on, he thought the sentence sounded familiar. This was what Li Xianni said to Lu Shu at the start. Li Xianni said that before the ancestor of the Hall of Swords opened the snowy mountains, rivers were already formed. Snowy mountains were formed instantly when the Sea of Qi was opened. Therefore, Li Xianni's words was the sentence, "The owner of the sword hut is the ancestor of the Hall of Swords?" Was that why the old king of gods returned to Earth to kidnap the ancestor of the Hall of Swords? He was such a powerful individual but got kidnapped just like that? He was fucking impressive. Lu Shu was thinking about how the other party died since the ancestor of the Hall of Swords was so powerful. Now it seemed that instead of dying, he was kidnapped. Chapter 10:14, Wen Zaifu's Memorial. Lu Shu examined the sword hut's records. Most of the content at the back was about the disciples' training progress. When was the Sea of Qi opened and when was the snowy mountains established? Then, for those who were impressive, comments such as "so awesome" were written while those who were slightly weaker were looked down on. He did not know that there was a similar record of the sword play on Earth. However, for that book, the ancestor was kidnapped when the book just started to be used. Therefore, the rest of the book was based on the succeeding disciples' own creativity. However, Lu Shu was able to confirm that the owner of the sword hut was the ancestor of the Hall of Swords. However, he was thinking, was the training method of the sword hut in the universe better than that on Earth? After all, such a long time had passed and there ought to be some disparities in the development of both parties. However, that did not mean that Lu Shu had to learn the swordplay of the universe. He had already made progress in terms of swordplay and the sound of Tao was the evidence. Therefore, he did not have to follow others' footsteps as he could accomplish something by himself. In fact, based on the records, the ancestors merely merged their sea of qi into an ocean. Lu Shu, on the other hand, managed to merge his sea of qi into an ocean and create snowy mountains too. Therefore, if they were in the same realm, the ancestor of the sword hut might not be able to beat Lu Shu. Lu Shu suddenly thought about why he was so outstanding in every single field, including his looks. He was quite arrogant. Lu Shu flipped through the records and suddenly froze. Then, he slammed the records shut and was in a daze for a while. Why did that happen? Was it mere coincidence or an arrangement? It can't be so coincidental, mumbled Lu Shu. He should stop thinking about problems which he could not figure out. Lu Shu got up and began to look at the other types of books. Most of them were printed. They should be obtained from the palace of the King of Gods. Read the historical books to understand universe history. Read the military books to understand how wars were carried out in the universe. He did not know what genre to look for in order to figure out how to go back to Earth. Therefore, he could only blindly search. Thankfully, he had enough time and was patient enough. Half a month had passed just like that. Anyway, he brought enough supplies to last him through and did not feel stressed at all. There was also a toilet in the space and he did not know where the water used to flush the toilet came from. However, Lu Shu was not anxious. Gu Lingfei was anxious. She thought Lu Shu would come out within 3 days' time, but Lu Shu stayed for at least half a month. Did Lu Shu starve to death? However, Gu Lingfei understood it after thinking about it carefully. Lu Shu must be carrying food with him. Then, she would not know when Lu Shu would King exit. The thought of how she was unable to enter annoyed her greatly. Moreover, she did not believe that Lu Shu was the type of person who was able to get rid of his loneliness by reading books. Everyone would get tired after a prolonged period of reading, right? When we were young, we were lazy and did not read books despite our teachers telling us to, including the senior disciples. How could Lu Shu have such determination? Therefore, Gu Lingfei felt that Lu Shu was doing improper things in the library, perhaps he was doodling on the books. If master returned, who should bear the responsibility? Meanwhile, the books surrounding Lu Shu nearly buried him. Lu Shu picked out 100 books from each genre to look for hints on how to get back to Earth. However, he was disappointed as nothing seemed to be related to it. It felt as though the owner of the sword hut and the individual in the palace of the King of Gods treated the barrier between the two worlds as the biggest secret. Was it to protect themselves or was it for other reasons? Suddenly, Lu Shu spotted something different. It was the records of the memorials in the past, including details such as the sender, the content and the King of Gods' reply. Lu Shu realized that memorials seemed to be the biggest genre in the library, it occupied one entire wall. At this moment, Lu Shu saw Wen Zaifu's name. Since the start, Lu Shu was cautious of Wen Zaifu. It was because Wen Zaifu gave him such a strong and unique impression. Therefore, Lu Shu flipped open Wen Zaifu's memorial records out of interest when he saw it. However, the contents devastated him. Wen Zaifu, King, I heard that your mistress will be performing swordplay during the sword hut ceremony this year. Can I go and take a look? King of Gods, there's no need to report to me. Next month, Wen Zaifu, King, I heard that the begonia flowers by the palace's roadside is blooming. Can I go and take a look? King of Gods, sure. The next month, Wen Zaifu, King, I don't feel like being the Lord of Heaven anymore. It is so much better to look after the Imperial Dragon soldiers. I was their main instructor. King of gods, scram. The next month, Wen Zaifu, king, please control your mistress, her killer aura is too strong. Wen Zaifu, king, are you doing well? King of gods, yes. The following month, Wen Zaifu, king, are you doing well? King of gods, scram. Lu Shu was stunned for a moment. No wonder the king of gods wanted to kick Wen Zaifu out of the palace. If his memorials were so cringy, then how was he like in person? Lu Shu would not be able to tolerate it too. However, Lu Shu suddenly realized that Zhang Weiyu mentioned that Wen Zaifu shut himself for 5 years straight, and did not ask about what happened around him. However, the memorials were sent on a monthly basis. Occasionally, there were 2 memorials sent in a month. He flipped the book for a long time and realized that Wen Zaifu did not stop writing his memorials for the past hundreds of years. How was he isolated? It felt like he was never isolated before. Lu Shu sighed. So Wen Zaifu isolated himself from the world because the old king of gods was no longer around. Nobody would look at his memorials, and the begonia flowers at the roadside of the palace was no longer beautiful. Therefore, he isolated himself for 5 years. Perhaps when he opened his eyes 5 years later, the old king of gods would return. The old king of gods definitely trusted Wen Zaifu enough to place the space passageway that he arrived through, in the north region. That was because the old king of gods knew that Wen Zaifu would definitely not betray him. Therefore, Lu Yizhao, Zhang Weiyu and the rest were all in the north region. Thinking deeper, Lu Shu felt that their brotherly relationship was rather touching. However, Wen Zaifu was really cringy. Lu Shu placed the books down. He felt that he probably would not be able to find any other clues in the library. Initially, he thought he would be able to find the way home in the library and stay away from the Luniverse battles. However, it suddenly struck him that he had to look for the way home outside of the library. Sooner or later, he had to deal with things that had to be dealt with. Chapter 10-15, Flood of Bronze, Gather. Luo City gradually became hotter in April. The spring rain after Qingming Festival did not do much to cool Luo City down. Nothing much seemed to have changed. The progress of the magically rich era gradually slowed down. The people who were supposed to awaken had awakened. The others had returned to their ordinary lives. The heavenly network's control over the metahumans relaxed slightly. Some metahumans even became internet celebrities on video applications. But all the metahumans had to be recorded. They were also under the jurisdiction of the heavenly network. It was as if Chen Zuan had been abandoned by his family. He did not have pocket money or resources from his family. When Chen Zuan went back during the new year, many elders in his family had changed their attitude towards him. To the elders, those of the same age as him were still children, but Chen Zuan could sit at the main table during meals. While they ate, his father praised him, which was something that did not occur often. He said that they fought well at Tiger's back, and that the fight was very impressive. Then, his father drank 2 glasses of alcohol and started talking about his battles back in the day. The family was joyous and harmonious. But Chen Zuan, who once wanted to receive the acknowledgement of his family, now felt that these affairs were not so important. He was like a person who was independent of his family. Everything he did had nothing to do with his family. When his uncles and aunties asked whether he could help some people enter the heavenly network, he politely rejected them. Someone asked him to perform practitioner skills, but was stopped by his father. When Chen Zuan went to the courtyard to smoke, Chen Bailey suddenly came and said, "Don't think that your training has diluted your affection towards your family. This is something I have spent over 20 years thinking about before understanding. Some of them might be unscrupulous, but they are still family, and they do not mean evil. Big families have their own problems. It is enough as long as we are good people." Chen Zuan's eyes turned red. On New Year's Eve, while he was smoking, he suddenly felt that it was the first time his granduncle had talked to him this much. This meant that he had finally decided to acknowledge him. But the person who had helped him gain the acknowledgement of his family was not here. No one cared that he was smoking. No one treated him like a student. This was what he had desired in the past. But now, it was different. He felt that something was missing. He looked up and asked, "Will Brother Shu be able to return?" "He will." Chen Bailey said calmly, "Are you still worried about him?" "He'll be fine." That night, Chen Xuan returned to Luo City. Later on, he realized that Cheng Qiuqiao did the same. On the other hand, Chao Qingxi was still waiting at the passageway. He was shocked when he saw the car parked outside the door. Cheng Qiuqiao suddenly said, "Brother Xuan, my family gave me a credit card to buy a car in Luo City. I can explain." Although he had taken his driving test when he graduated from high school, Cheng Qiuqiao never expected himself to be able to drive so early on. This was a common occurrence among young people in China. Although they obtained their driver's license early, it would take many years before they were able to drive their own car. But now, Cheng Qiuqiao received similar treatment as Chen Xuan. When he went home, he was treated like an adult. His mother had started to think about his marriage. She even prepared a few names for Cheng Qiuqiao's future children. But Cheng Qiuqiao was only 18 years old. To many people, they had become heroes after the battle at Tiger's Back. But Chen Xuan and Cheng Qiuqiao did not realize this immediately. The entire flood of bronze in the heavenly network took some time to realize this. When they returned and saw others treating them with respect, they finally realized that they had become heroes. The bronze armor had been recorded with the name of its user and stored away, as 99% of the flood of bronze members did not have invisible storage equipment. They could not wear the armor daily for work. If they placed it at home, people would look at it greedily as well. Thus, it was better to store it with the heavenly network. Furthermore, during this period of time, the members of the Flood of Bronze in various regions of the country had started to gather in Luo City because of the incident on Longmen Mountain. This was a slow process, as they needed someone to replace them when they left. Thus, only some of them were here. But Chen Xuan knew that in the future, the entire Flood of Bronze would gather in Luo City. A massive fortress would also be built around Luo City. The heavenly network kept the bronze armor in the Luotian Cultivation College campus. They even said that they would make improvements to the armor. Everyone sensed the tension in the atmosphere. Some felt that the opening of the passageway above Longmen Mountain was simply a coincidence, but no one doubted Nie Ting's decision. Chen Xuan looked at Cheng Qiuqiao. "How much money did your family give you? If you want to buy a car, you should buy a good one. If not, it will not be smooth when you drive." Cheng Qiuqiao was silent. He said, "They gave me 200,000. I feel that it is a decent price." Chen Xuan judged him. 200,000? Can you call that a car? Cheng Qiuqiao was silent again. He said, "Do you have 200,000? No." This was slightly awkward. Chen Xuan did not ask for pocket money from his family. Furthermore, he always spent all of his salary from the heavenly network. How would he have any savings? Chen Xuan volunteered to help Cheng Qiuqiao choose a car. Cheng Qiuqiao suddenly asked, "Have you ordered a car that is worth 200,000? No, confessed Chen Xuan. Then why are you helping me choose? Cheng Qiuqiao was puzzled. They went to a showroom to look at cars. Chen Xuan insisted that they test drive the cars. He looked at the marketing manager with disdain. The marketing manager checked their licenses and brought the car out. They had just gotten in the car. Before the marketing manager could do anything, dark clouds suddenly gathered about Longmen Mountain. There was the continuous sound of thunder. Everyone in Luo City could see what was happening. It was as if the end of the world had come. Chen Xuan and Cheng Qiuqiao's phones suddenly rang. Chen Xuan looked at his phone and roared, "Hurry up, we have to return to Luotian Cultivation College and get our bronze armor. The marketing manager was dumbfounded. Are the two of you from the Flood of Bronze? The marketing manager felt a sense of pride. He was bringing 2 members of the Flood of Bronze for a test drive. My God, what a miracle! Before he could say anything, Chen Zuan said to Cheng Qiuqiao, yes, 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 step on the gas. Let's go. The marketing manager almost cried, it was as if he was riding a roller coaster. Chen Zuan and Cheng Qiuqiao were panicking. The Heavenly Network announced a Level 1 emergency. Everyone was to prepare for battle. Flood of Bronze, assemble. If it was as Zhong Yutong and Nie Ting had worried about, the pathway was going to open. Furthermore, it was not good news.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, then we just put 'em on the shelf. Try to look to the heavens,